All right, welcome back, Algebra 1 students. Um, we're going to continue our e-learning or distance learning with the video here on section 9.3, solving quadratic equations using the square root property. Reviewing inverse of operations, basically meaning what can I do to both sides to get rid of something. For instance, if I had an addition sign, let's say I was adding 3, and I want to get rid of that, I would subtract. Or if I had something that was being multiplied and I want to get rid of that, then I would divide. So again, inverse operations to both sides. And so when we're talking about how do I get rid of something that is being squared, well, in order to get rid of something being squared, you would then need to take the square root of. So again, if you have a problem in which you are trying to get rid of an x squared, and you want that just to be an x, then you would take the square root. So here we go. I want to solve this question. Normal solving of a problem. So you're going to add 27 to both sides. Divide by 3 to both sides. And then here's the part that ultimately that we need to solve using the square root property. X squared equals 9. I want to take the square root of both sides. Now, there is a little tidbit that we need to talk about. Anytime you take the square root of both sides of an equation, the answer will always be plus and minus. So you're going to get a plus and minus sign, and then the square root of 9 is 3. So the answer to this question is positive and negative 3. Reason for that, when you square positive 3, you get 9. When you square negative 3, again, negative 3 times negative 3, you get 9. So that's why you need both the plus and the minus. So the next one, you're going to add 10. Take the square root of both sides. Now, I know in the last question I made a big deal about plus and minus. You don't need a plus and minus if it is 0. Okay, positive 0, negative 0. 0 is neutral. Now, another little twist then on the next one. I'm going to subtract 11 from both sides. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. X squared equals negative 1. Taking the square root of both sides, you're going to get an error. Square root of negative 1 or square root of any negative, it has no real solution. You'll get into it when you get into Algebra 2. You'll get into imaginary solutions. But for right now, if you end up taking the square root of a negative, put no solution. I can take the square root of this. This is a binomial being squared, and I don't want you to actually FOIL this out. I just want you to take the square root of both sides. X minus 1 would equal plus and minus 5. And then split this into two questions. X minus 1 equaling positive 5, x minus 1 equaling negative 5, and solve both. So the next one, again, when I take the square root of both sides, I don't need a plus and minus 0. So this particular question, instead of having two answers, it's only going to have one. Now we're going to get a little bit in depth here. Now we're going to actually, you don't distribute, just divide. So there's a number out in front that's being multiplied. I can divide by that number. Take the square root of both sides. Anytime you take the square root of both sides, you get a plus or minus answer. Square to the top, square to the bottom. And then split this into two questions. X minus 3 equaling positive 3 halves. X minus 3 equaling negative 3 halves. Add 3. So I end up getting 4 1/2 or 9 halves. Add 3. So this I'll get 1 1/2 or 3 halves. So again, I'll accept the fraction or the decimal on either one of these. Graphically checking. So now let's go back to a question that if I wanted to solve this, okay, and I'm going to go ahead and solve it by hand. X minus 1 quantity squared equals 25. Take the square root of both sides. Plus minus 5. And so this is what I just did on the previous couple of pages. I solved, add 1, I get 6, and add 1, I get negative 4. Again, kind of going back to something that we've talked about previously by solve by graphing. Notice that if I went ahead and graphed this, I made it into this equation right here. I set it equal to 0 and graphed it. Notice that it hits the x-axis at negative 4, 0, which means x equals negative 4, and hits over here at 5, 0. So the x-intercept, which gets you x equals 5. So again, solving just by checking graphically, solving using square root property, and solving by graphing should get you the same answer. And I messed up over here. I'm sorry if I confused somebody. 6, 0, and x equals 6. I apologize for that. Okay, so again, if somebody was like, what in the world is he doing there? I accidentally messed up. So yes, x equals 6. Solve using square roots, round your solution to the nearest hundredth. So now you're going to need to get out a calculator. We're going to do the same thing, except I want a decimal answer. So 4x squared minus 13 equals 15. Add 13 to both sides and divide by 4. So now x squared equals 7. Take the square root of both sides, plus or minus the square root of 7. So now on my calculator, I want to actually calculate what the square root of 7 is. So x would equal plus or minus 2.65, rounding it to 2 decimal places. So now you try it. Go ahead and hit the pause button. And welcome back. 5x squared equals 2. 2/5. Take the square root of both sides. And so x would equal plus and minus the square root of 2/5. So I end up getting 0.63. Take the square root of both sides. 2x plus 1 equals plus and minus 6. Now, if that did end up being a decimal, that's okay. You're still going to split into 2 questions. 2x plus 1 equaling positive 6. 2x plus 1 equaling negative 6. Subtract 1. Running out of space here. 2x equals 5. Divide by 2. X is equal to 5/2. So there's one answer. Subtract 1. Negative 7. Divide by 2. X would equal negative 7/2, or negative 3.5. Same with the other one. If you put 2.5, I would have accepted that as well. Touch tank has a height of 3 feet. Its length is 3 times the width, and the volume of the tank is 270. So again, they're trying to give you some information here. So the height is 3. So that I'm told. H is 3. The length is 3 times the width. So the width is just W, and the length is 3W. Find the volume of the tank. Excuse me, the volume of the tank is 270. Find the width and the length. So now, 270 equals 3W times W times 3, which gets me 9W squared. And I can solve this from what I learned today. Divide both sides by 9. W squared equals 30. Take the square roots of both sides. Oops, don't mean to have an X there. W would equal plus or minus and I'm going to write this as a decimal, plus or minus 5.48. So with that being said, if the width, the height is 3 feet, the width is 5.48 feet, and then the length would be 3 times that, which is 16.43 feet. And actually 4 depending on your rounding there. So I'm just going to put 4 feet. So again, solving a real world situation there. Next one, the area of an equilateral triangle with the side length of s can be given as the formula a equals the square root of 3 over 4 s squared. Solve the formula for s, then approximate the side length. So again, they want me to solve this for s. So what would I have to do? Multiply both sides by 4, divide by the square root of 3. So 4a over the square root of 3. Now, rationalize the denominator. I'm not sure how many teachers are going to make you actually do that, but 4a square root of 3 over 3, if I multiply both the top and the bottom by the square root of 3, and then take the square roots of both sides. So s equals, and this is a pretty lengthy question here, 4a square root of 3 over 3. Now, the question is, what if I put 390 in for a? So 4 times 390 times the square root of 3 over 3 and the square root of that. So now pull out a calculator. Let's go ahead and type that in. 4 times 390 times the square root of 3. Divide that by 3 and do the square root of that answer. Now this is pretty close to just about exactly 30 inches would be the side length. So if I had a side length of 30 by 30 by 30, it would have an area of 390. So now, state the number of solutions for each one. So all they want is the number of solutions. So as I go through this, 2x squared is 32. I want you to go ahead and solve this. So if I'm taking the square root of both sides, I'm getting plus and minus 4, which means there's 2 solutions. So again, I would go ahead and solve this and then just say whether or not there's 2 solutions, 1 solution, no solution. So adding 8 for the next one, dividing by 2, and I take the square root of both sides. Can't take a square root of a negative. That's a no-no. So this is why there's no solution. Last one, divide by 2. Take the square root of both sides. Because you're taking the square root of 0, you're only going to get 1 solution. So you don't need a plus 0 and a minus 0. So your homework assignment is out of the book. I'm sure this will be located on Google Classroom so that you will not necessarily have to have your book, but you can have your book as well. Please be safe. Please ask questions. Most teachers are trying to do some Zoom meetings, things like that, in which you can ask questions and get some help on things. If you have any questions, reach out to us, and hope everything goes well.